Yeah, go ahead.
Good evening. A very warm welcome to all of you for this panel discussion on role of managers and leaders in building an inclusive culture. I'm Swarajita Panda, senior consultant for Marching Sheep, which is among the leading HR consulting firms in India, recognized by Forbes, Fortune, Your Story, and several other platforms. As diversity and inclusion strategy is getting aligned with organizations' overall business strategy, the business case for diversity and inclusion today is stronger than ever. This alignment and the overall institutionalization of the DNI initiative can only be sustained if it is truly supported by leaders. As employees experience the organization through their managers, it is imperative to develop managers in handling biases and equipping them in creating a culture of growth. With organization structures becoming flatter and more collaborative, inclusive leadership is considered a future proof leadership practice. Through today's panel discussion, we look at having meaningful interaction to understand the role of HR, leaders, and managers in building an inclusive culture. It is our absolute honor to welcome our esteemed panelists who are strong leaders, successful icons from diverse industries. Let me take the opportunity to quickly introduce our panelists. Our first panelist, Rachana Panda, who comes with 25 years of industry experience as a mentor, board member, jury, and influencer. She is currently the Vice President Communications, Public Affairs, and Sustainability at Bayer South Asia and has earlier worked for organizations like GE, Alstom, Alcatel, TCI, and Apollo Tyres. She is a selected mentor at the Government of India's Atal Innovation Program to build a culture of innovation in the country. She is also a mentor at Nexus Incubator Hub at the American Center. Rachana is on the founding board of Global Women in PR India to promote promotional development of PR professionals and also serves as a board member Asia Pacific Association of Communication Directors. She serves as a jury member at Sabre Fulcrum Marketing Society and has contributed to many leading publications. As an international speaker, she leads conversations on sustainability and societal engagement at forums like AMIC International, Provoke, ET Brand Equity, and many more, and is rated as a top thought leader and communicator at the Asia Pacific level. An active member on networks like HBS Alumni and Future of Us, which works on generational diversity. She is an Harvard Business School alumni and holds a degree in business management. Welcome, Rachna. Our second panelist, Ganga Ganpati, who combines experiences in advertising with DDB Mudra, Ogilvy Leo Burnett, analytics with HP, and now Martech and AdTech with Epsilon. With much time spent in traditional advertising and now a passion for data and technology, she has worked in local as well as global delivery models, selling and executing ideas that drive modern marketing across regions. Her experience with consumer brands and B2B technology driven brands helps craft compelling reasons for marketers to adopt methods to help drive deeper consumer connections that will help them win in a platform world. When not at work, Ganga mentors women in middle management to build sustainable careers and is a river warrior seeking to protect the river Kaveri from development led destruction by tapping into behaviors and culture codes that can influence the way people perceive and engage with this important natural resource. As a member of the governing council of MICA, Ganga is also grateful to give back to her alma mater, where her professional journey began 24 years ago. Her working years have been balanced being a daughter, a partner, a mother, a friend, a colleague, and in being herself. And all these have become interconnected in strange new ways in the era of the pandemic and will doubtlessly influence the way she hopes to lead in the coming years. A very warm welcome, Ganga. Our third panelist, Tanima Dhawan, began her journey with FoxyMoron as a senior executive and has moved up the ranks to lead as the HR director of Zoo Media, the homegrown network of 7 different agencies. Over the course of the last 6 years, Tanima has worked diligently to manage an employee base of over 250 plus employees across 3 locations while leading her 8 member team. Tanima's ability to take up challenges head on has proven to be instrumental in setting up systematic processes across Zoom Media offices in Mumbai, Gurgaon, and Bengaluru. Her understanding of core aspects of business, as well as human resource management, from conceptualization to business intelligence to human resource operations of an organization, is unparalleled. She truly believes in empowering employees through engagement and inclusion. This can be best explained by her efforts to set up a fortnightly meet called Foxy Friday, a gathering of all offices to unwind virtually over a wide range of activities. She conceptualized the wellness break for the employees at Zoom Media, which ensured employees got a week long break during the pandemic. Her background as the daughter of an army officer ensures that she is disciplined, resourceful, and is able to adapt to new environments and people with ease. She believes with leading with empathy, a strongly upheld value of Zoo. When she is not busy setting up a structure to the madness under the Zoo network, she can be seen traveling or baking. Tanima has an MBA in HR and finance from Symbiosis International University, Pune. Tanima, we welcome you today. And last but not the least, our moderator for today, Sonika Aaron, is the founder and managing partner of Marching Sheep. An XLRI postgraduate, Sonika has been featured by Forbes magazine among the top 10 women entrepreneurs in India in 2020, as India's most valued people in 2021, as inspirational icons in leadership by Fortune India in 2021, and among the top 100 digital influencers by Your Story. She decided to set up Marching Sheep in 2013 with a vision of making a difference to people's lives and careers and driving respect and equality for all. Seen as a thought leader in the industry, her opinions on diversity, equity, and inclusion and progressive HR practices have been published by leading publications across the country. A very warm welcome to all the panelists and to all those who have joined us today virtually. And before I conclude, I would request all the attendees to keep putting their questions in the comments and mention who you are addressing the question to so the panelists can take the question accordingly. We will have a hard stop at 8 p.m. Now, I hand over to Sonika to take this exciting discussion forward.
Thank you so much, Sorajita, for that wonderful introduction. And I'm really excited about this conversation, having interacted with Ganga, Rachna, and Tanima. I know today's conversation is extremely close to our hearts. We truly believe, all of us, how critical it is in today's time and age that inclusion be held by all of us, be a joint responsibility across everybody in the organization. In the last 2 decades that I have been with the industry, I have really seen the narrative of diversity and inclusion evolve. There was a time when nobody used to even talk about diversity and inclusion. Way back in 2001, when I started my first job, it was not even a conversation. Women were joining, the workforce, but was it a stated intent? Was there a strategy? Was there a plan? Uh, was there even a plan that if they were hiring women, what would happen when a management trainee who was a girl, she would get married and want to relocate? How would they manage that? So there was no strategic intent really. From then to now, right, there's a huge difference. And what still is a question mark is whether DNI is still seen as something that HR needs to drive. Is it still considered something which is good to do, the soft and floof thing, as they say, the soft and fluffy thing to do? And the question really that comes to my mind is that what is the role that managers and leaders really play in driving an inclusive culture? So I would like to start with that very basic question. And if you could all share your thoughts to set the ball rolling. And let me start with you, Ganga. What do you think about this?
Thank you, Sonika. Like you said, I think all of us have worked in environments that have seen a huge transformation, right? From the time when managers really led by instinct. So either you were lucky enough to have the right sort of values which helped you be a good manager, or you got lucky enough to find a manager who had the right approach and therefore laid the right foundation for the kind of leader that you became.
We are losing you, Ganga.
Are you losing me?
Ganga, I'm sorry, I lost. Yeah, I didn't hear what you said.
Can you hear me?
Yes, now I can hear you. So you were saying something about, that you got lucky, managers led by instinct. Okay, we lost her.
Sorry, can you
Rachna,
hear me?
while we wait for her, why don't you? Okay, now she's back.
Okay, I'm so sorry. It was all going well, and suddenly this. So
Yeah.
I was saying today, business impact of inclusive practices has been recognized, and therefore there is no space for any ambiguity in the experience that we offer our employees. Right. So at an organizational and at the HR level, philosophies and values are very clearly crafted. And the role
Hmm.
of the manager is to be able to identify with that, internalize it, make sure that you own what you're hearing from what your company has crafted, and translate that to employees in ways that they deserve to be treated. And that's the only way why culture gets built top down, experiences are really bottom up, right? And that's the critical role that managers across levels play in ensuring a consistent experience across the entire organization.
Hmm. I really love what you say, that experiences are bottom up. End of the day, how a manager makes an employee feel is where the rubber hits the road, isn't it? The tire hits the road. So lovely. Thank you so much for that. Yes, Rachna, your opening comments.
Yeah. First of all, thank you, Sonika and Saurajita, for getting here. It's a great opportunity to be able to actually speak on a topic like this, which is really very close to my heart. It's very interesting to see across my working life of 25 years. I've seen that more and more awareness is built around it. What was earlier a push is now a pull strategy, right? So
Hmm.
I don't think organizations need to push this as much as they did maybe around 20 years back. Now there is a lot of demand. In fact, when we go and I'm sure everybody's experienced this, when we go out and recruit employees or the youngsters or generations right now, it is fantastic to see how the first question they want to see is how inclusive are we,
Hmm.
right? Or any organization for that matter. Why organization? Even countries. I remember, I mean, now I'm looking at my daughter who talks about, uh, you know, uh, should I go and do my higher studies in a place which is more inclusive? So, inclusive is something that every organization is talking about. And,
Right.
right now, most organizations say IND. Earlier, we used to say
Yes.
DNI. Now it's IND, inclusive
Yes.
first, and then diversity. So, the
Yes.
very change in tone by itself, I guess, is becoming extremely critical. Second,
So true.
it's full strategy, right? It's pull
Sorry,
now.
say that again.
Everybody, it's a pull thing. It's no more a push from top down. It's a pull
Hmm.
thing where the employees, the prospective employees, everybody, the stakeholders, the investors, the external audience is all expecting that out of the organization, and it is a part of the SDG goals, the 13 SDG goals that the organizations have started looking at. So it's no longer a choice. So when
Hmm.
I come to the leaders and managers, I would say one, everybody's becoming aware. Second, more and more organizations are sensitizing, training leaders and managers. If we have to
Hmm.
recruit the brightest, if we have to retain them, and if we have to have a culture which is growth oriented, there is no choice but to behave in a particular manner. And IND is the first thing I guess all of us are have to be committed to.
Excellent. Thank you so much for putting that out so straight on the table. That it is now actually there is no choice. It is now coming from all sides, and you were very right. It is now also coming from the investors. The other day I read an article that for many startups, startups usually keep HR, DNI for later, but for a lot of investors it is an important consideration, right? So thanks for putting that out right on the table. Tanima, your take. I think Tanima is having network issues. Tanima, you there? Tanima?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so thanks, Ganga, and thanks, Rachna, for putting it out there. I think the points are very, very relevant. And while earlier it was an option, now it's not an option anymore. And I think organizations are progressively also making that a matter of their personal preference, right? And I think that is where the change is also coming through. Earlier the awareness about this was limited, and it was more as forced that we have to do it because it looks in a particular way. Now I think with awareness, with education, with the fact that we have people who demand this, I think it's a matter of also choice for organizations to take up certain strategies and processes. And I think the role that managers play here is very, very critical, because they are the first. They're the primary culture drivers that would exist in any organization, so to say, right? An employee would best of employee experiences and worst of employee experiences are all via managers. So they say, right, an employee experiences the organization through their managers, and I think managers hold a very key role to play. They have this innate capability uh, towards driving something to a point, right? And anything, and the way that they behave or the way that they react translates down as culture within the organization. So I think more it's a more matter of choice rather than it being something forced, in my opinion. Now it's a personal preference that the organizations make today, and which is great. I think it's a great thing.
Right. Thank you so much for saying that. And you're absolutely right, because uh, managers being primary culture drivers, that takes away the fact that the primary onus of driving IND, and I will take that from Rachna, that primary onus of driving IND is the HR responsibility. What HR can best do is possibly give policies, can put practices, can give templates. But end of the day, when an employee comes to work, the whether the employee feels valued, whether the employee is able to speak up, whether the employee is able to get their authentic self, is defined by their interaction with their manager, and that makes the manager and the leader's role so very critical, right? So, Rachna, let me come to you here, and and let me bring this point straight out, because here, there has been a lot of discussion these days around returning back to office, and it is very close to the point of inclusion, because end of the day, employee expectations has changed significantly in the last 2 years. Employees now think very differently. Their relationship to work has changed very quite a bit. There are some people who wish to come back to office and have that interpersonal connection, but there are some people who have found their balance in remote working, and they say that, why should I spend those 4 hours stuck in traffic when I can be doing something much more meaningful in those 4 hours? And when I have been so productive in, sitting at home and being away. But where organizations are mandating, while there are a lot of organizations that have embraced remote working, they have embraced hybrid working, but I have also heard of a lot of organizations who are being completely rigid. And it's not just in India, but across the globe. I was today reading an article in the HRD magazine where they said that managers have gone to the extent of cutting salaries or penalizing employees by, various methodologies. Uh, so why this entire uh, mistrust, should I say, or this push to go back to like things were pre COVID? Why can we not be inclusive to a different point of view that employees want to bring now to wanting a flexible way of working?
Yeah, yeah. Great question, Sonika. And I would put it this way that a lot of organizations, it also depends on the sector. For example,
Hmm.
if somebody is in the manufacturing sector, you just can't work from home, right? So while we have to keep that in mind, the operations, manufacturing, and even other some other functions like that, they have to be there in person. But variable flexibility is possible. I think a lot of progressive organizations start have learned the art of trust, I guess,
Hmm.
during COVID, right? But
Hmm.
that again depends on the culture of the organization.
Yeah.
In terms of, if you want to retain the best of candidates, you have to.
Hmm.
We know that the market is opened up now. We know that not the differentiator cannot always be compensation. The
Yes.
differentiation has to be culture. And in
Yes.
organizations which are flexible, which are inclusive, are definitely flexible. You can't talk about inclusivity without flexibility,
Hmm.
right?
And can you
Because
give
if
me
you
some? Hmm. Go ahead, please.
sure,
Sorry.
sure. So I think people, a lot of organizations talk about IND without, and if they're stubborn about these policies, then it's they're not walking the talk. But I can talk
Yeah.
about companies like Bayer, right, where we
Hmm.
have manufacturing units, we have sales teams who, in any case, we're out in the fields, right?
Yes.
We are very, very inclusive when it comes to women. We also have women who are, visually challenged. We work with transgenders to make them employable. So, I mean, when you have such a diverse workforce, you have to be flexible. And I think COVID has taught all of us that you have to trust your teams. Otherwise, you're going to lose the best of talent. And I'll tell you, I mean, early in my career, that was much, much before COVID. We had in one of my earlier jobs, I had one of our best performers in my team who comes up one day and says, "Hey, Rachna, I do want to put in my papers." And he was just around 1 year into the system. And I was like
Hmm.
really shocked. And he said, "I'm a single child. I want to go back to my family. My father is not keeping well." And that time, we never had this concept of work from home from anywhere,
And
right? But
this
the
was a male or a
organization,
female?
a male, a male,
A male.
a
And
male,
it's very
right?
important for the audience to know that it can also be a male who needs a flexibility.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And as women, who better than us would understand what this means,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I remember speaking to my managers, to the HR, and thankfully it was an organization who understood. But it is both ways. The HR came up with a very valid point saying if you are flexible for one, you might have such cases where you will not be able to say no to others as well. But it is both ways. And I remember giving a flexibility of working from anywhere. I remember the person working out of Lucknow for almost more than a year, but he was
Hmm.
200% on the job, and
Hmm.
he continued to be with the organization, with me. And today, we even if I've left that organization, he's moved on, he's really grown. But we've really, I've gained a lot from the person. And
Right.
these are small instances. Even now, I'm seeing in my team at Bayer, everybody is very scattered. A few of them have moved back to their old parents. We're not really
Hmm.
pushing them to come back. We're saying, please go to the nearest office twice or thrice a week and work from anywhere. But work needs to be done, right?
Yeah.
I think managers and leaders are learning. They have to get the confidence of their leaders. They have to have the push from the HR in terms of support. And I can tell you, organizations who are progressive and supportive, there are various discussions and debates at the leadership level, right? And it works both
Yeah.
ways. You would only do this for somebody who you can put the bet on. So it is, while
Yeah.
it is our responsibility as leaders to be flexible, to be inclusive, to be supportive, I think it's also important for the workforce and our teams to build that trust with us, right? In
Yes.
both ways.
Yes, absolutely. I completely agree that, empathy and trust does not come at the cost of accountability or responsibility, right? But at the same time, there was somebody who said that 95% of your workforce comes to put in a good hard day's work, because end of the day we all are working for our families, we are all working to give them a good life, we are all working to give our children a good future, we are all working because we want to grow and we are ambitious. And end of the day we need to be able to trust each other. And I completely agree with you. There would be some roles like manufacturing and sales. And even during COVID, in the peak of COVID, there were some essential services that went on working. So there would be some roles which would not allow for flexibility. But then there would be some office roles which can allow for flexibility. And why should we still be rigid and not inclusive or flexible? There is a question which keeps popping up every now and then. So, Ganga, coming to you, taking on from where Rachna left, that, it needs trust on both the sides. But balancing between employees and business needs also requires courage. And courageous leadership, what does it really mean in today's context? You're on mute. You're on mute, Ganga.
Sorry, yeah. I think first we need to acknowledge and recognize even in ourselves that we're all looking for courageous leaders, right? We don't want leaders who take the easy way out and hide behind niceties when a tough conversation has to be had. And being a courageous organization or a courageous leader, I think, comes when you're operating from a position of trust and faith. And for me, one of the guiding principles has been, because I'm a kid and influenced by what I saw growing up, the Chetwood quote, right, which is there on the doors of the IMA as you walk out, which says, and I am happy to replace country with company, because today, if our company is responsible for our livelihood, we owe it the same love and patriotism that, our parents owed the country. So, in a way, I'd say the safety, honor, and welfare of your company or your organization that you work for comes first, always and every time. The honor, welfare, and comfort of the people you command come next. Your own ease, comfort, and safety comes last, always and every time. And if we follow this well, I think we'll never find ourselves on the wrong foot as leaders, because you're always operating from perspective of somebody else's success, right? And automatically people will come to believe that you're doing what is right for all of them. And when we do this, we create environments that help our people operate at the height of their creativity, their passion, and their commitment to the organization. And everybody ends up being courageous. People lean in to help each other, knowing that, hey, we are, in all of this together. One of the things that I learned, in Epsilon, and really this organization, I've been here for close to 5 years now, has done so much to help me shape my vision of inclusive leadership, is the way you would even look at flexibility, right? It's so easy to think that, oh, women need flexibility. But a call that we took early on is that we will never make flexibility a gender benefit, right? So
Lovely.
everybody, even before the pandemic, was encouraged to adopt a flexible work culture, because what it meant is, when men who are seen as not needing flexibility are given the permission to use it, everybody in their teams feels that, oh, this is not a benefit and I won't be looked down upon if I use this benefit as well. The secondary benefit was when these men go home and have a flexible work culture, they respect what their partners and spouses are doing, right? And therefore, they might help their spouses thrive in their careers. Those are not epsilon employees. For us, society as a whole is benefiting. So for me, that was a fantastic example of putting flexibility, defining flexibility in a way that it worked for everybody.
Yes.
The other
Lovely.
thing we do is, say, when you're encouraging people to come back to work after a break, it's never positioned as a gender thing. It's never women coming back to work after a break. Everybody deserves to and can take a break, right? So encouraging people who've taken a break for various reasons, not just marriage and maternity. It could be travel, it could be elder care. There are so many reasons human beings need to take a break in life. And secondly, to not act like you're doing a favor to people when you're taking them back after a break. In fact, we believe that people coming back after a break are bringing so much more to the organization. Imagine a person who has built a human being in her womb for 9 months, right? Cared for their child for 6 months and coming back to work, what that person could do in the way she manages a team, right? Somebody who's
Mm.
traveled the world and come back, imagine the cultural richness that they bring back into your organization. So we really believe that we gain more when we encourage people to join us after a break. And again, it takes courage to say things like that. So I think these are the things I'm picking up in my own leadership journey with this organization.
Lovely examples. And let me put another twist, and this is something that I have observed in my various interactions with people. During the pandemic, we saw a lot of well intentioned policies, and I must say that the HR function has led from the front in a lot of cases. So, there were a lot of cases of, burnout coming up. People were not taking leaves. There was extended working hours and so on and so forth. So, there were a lot of these policies which were coming up, like meeting free Fridays, let us not disturb employees during lunch hours, or people were giving, wellness leaves, or saying, take a block of holidays, and stuff like that. But what I heard is a push, not a pushback, but a rather a commentary coming from employees across organizations, saying that what is the point of a meeting free Friday if on a Monday morning I have a sales review and I anyways end up working on a weekend? So, like what you said is that the policies and the structure is top down, but the experience is bottom up. Now, my question to you is that I can have the best HR policies in place, but where is the courageous leadership if I am not letting those policies reach my employees because I am badgering them for results?
Such a good question and so relevant to our times, right? And the way I would answer it, and maybe at the cost of sounding a little incorrect, is what is the balance between compassion and performance? Right? Compassion is
Mm.
extremely important, but so is performance. If we don't perform,
Yes.
our jobs and our organizations will cease to exist. So what is the soft boundary
Mm.
that you draw between the two? What is the permeability between the two? I think it's so very important for us to recognize that. That's one. The second is,
Mm.
I feel everybody, leaders as well as
Mm.
team members, need to assume positive intent. Let us not go to work assuming that somebody is out to get me, but assume that, hey, everybody is here to do a job. Everybody is fighting their own battles, right? Nobody has the mind space to screw around with people. So let's trust each other and let's
Yeah.
do our work to the best of our
Sorry.
no problem.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Also, I feel a company that
Yeah.
has a strong culture will never compromise short term performance numbers, profits over long term culture, because in the long run, a company like that won't be able to survive. And as employees and associates, what the call we probably need to take is, hey, give it your best, trust everybody, know the company wants you to succeed. But in spite of everything, if it's not working, figure out your own reasons for being in the job. A lot of times it might just be the money or the salary. Are you compromising culture and your own beliefs and philosophy for what might be salary? right? And something I think that you realize after a few decades of working is that over time it all becomes equal. It's okay to take a cut at a certain point. It's okay to start off at a slightly low level, but 10 years, compare yourself with your peers, no matter which company or organization you're in, apart from a few outliers, everybody is more or
Equalizes.
less in the bucket, right? So figure out what is your philosophy and your own internal beliefs that are driving you to work in a certain organization.
Right. So, great. Thank you so much for such a balanced answer on this. Tanima, let me ask you because you had when Tanima, you there? Yeah. So your organization took a tough stand when COVID hit, and of not letting a single employee suffer despite business taking a hit. Can you take us through what role did managers and leaders play here, and how have you built that culture in Zoom? Because that must have taken a lot of
All
time.
right. So it did, and I would say it's not just a singular effort, but an effort of it's a hard work of a lot of people involved in building a culture. It can never be singular, right? And that's I strongly believe that. But before I answer your question, Sonika, I'd like to kind of just give you a little bit of idea of what we call as managers, right? So most of the leadership when we talk about at Zoom Media today are people who've literally grown as the organization has grown and evolved as the network has evolved, right? So most of the leaders that we're talking of were maybe leaders or managers, or like myself. We were in FoxyMoron. FoxyMoron led to the creation of the Zoo network at large, right, which is 7 agency brands today. And I think what has been primary for us has been that all these people really believe in the ethos of this organization, where we've tried to keep people first, right? People have always been at the forefront of everything that we do. So whether it is about so advertising agencies are known to be notorious when it comes to work life balance and extended work hours and stuff. And when I say we've been a people first organization, we've tried to kind of institute measures or give suggestions in terms of how we create a work life balance, whether you start work early at 9 o'clock so that you can wrap up by 6:37 and have a work life balance. Or we spoke about the wellness break. So when COVID hit, we introduced the wellness break because we realized people require that break because of blurred boundaries between work from home and work for home and all the other things that came in between, right? So when COVID hit, right, in 2020 for the first time, the world for the first time, I think, actually understood the meaning of two words, uncertainty and ambiguity. And right, businesses were shutting shop. We were furloughs were a norm, right? And job insecurity was at its peak, right? And when we spoke about managers being culture drivers, right? We've always believed in that culture where we said people first. So it was a no-brainer for us. We say we are not going to let a single employee go, right?
I'm losing you in between, Tanima.
It did take a hit on us as business. Okay, so I said it was a no-brainer for us that we are not going to let a single employee go, right? It did mean that we had to take certain hard business decisions and said we are going to take this through, but we will not let a single employee go. So that's the influence that the leadership had on us, and we as managers took that call that we're not going to take this decision. But it also meant that we had to explain the rationale to our managers and employees very, very strongly. So we got them together and we told them, listen, we are going to do this, right? But we are all in this together. So what do you have to do? What is your contribution to this, right? And contribution needs to be that we're not going to mess up anywhere, right? Which is we are going to try and sustain businesses that we have, try and mine as much business as we can and help the organization grow, right? That's the only
Right.
way we can together get past this COVID mammoth that we are faced with today. Little did we know that it's going to take a couple of years, because that time was the assumption was that it's just going to be a couple of months, right? So we basically followed the route that we are going to keep people with us in this fight, right? Because they need to, this is not a favor, right? This is, we're all in this together, we're fighting for each other, right?
Absolutely.
And this is exactly what we did. And this resonates very clearly with the values at Zoo, right? So one of the core values at Zoo is empathy, right? We say walk a few steps in someone's shoes before you say the next thing, and this is the first value that we look out for when we are looking at bringing anybody on board, right? And we just said we're going to do what our heart thinks is the right thing to do, because we just didn't feel that to let go of somebody where everyone's lives are dependent on the money that they make from this organization, where the parents are dependent, there are families that are dependent, and we said we're going to do this for everybody. But we made sure everyone was a part of the process. It was not just something that the management decided to do. Everybody was a part. You said our role is to make sure we don't do this. We don't let go of anybody, but your role is to ensure that we don't lose business. We build a business, we sustain those relationships, nurture those relationships so that we are able to grow. Fortunately, the digital industry kept growing, because that was one industry that didn't stop, right? In fact, everything that was offline also wanted to come online, and therefore there was a growth or a surge in the digital business over a period of time. And we were able to fulfill the commitments that we made for everybody as well. But yes, it did take a lot of hard work, it did take a lot of resilience, and it did and when we started this journey, it was like, oh my god, how are we going to do this? But then we just took one step at a time, and with everybody, I think we pulled it off.
Yeah. And in a way, isn't this really inclusion? Because when you say that, okay, we took an empathetic decision saying that we will do what feels right, but back to Ganga's point, end of the day, it is all about performance, but you are doing it in a very inclusive way where you are telling the employees that let's do everything, let's not mess up so that we don't lose any client. Let's mine as much business as we can so that we help the business sustain and grow, right? So you are also telling them that listen, this can only work if you also pull up and make it work. So they also feel included in that entire journey. They also feel taken care of. They also feel valued that, yes, if the company is thinking of us, we also need to put in. And then it becomes a two-way street rather than uh, management versus employees. Management is deciding
Yeah,
something,
and
people
it's an
are
inclusive
doing something.
approach, right? The
Approach, right? So I completely get the way you've articulated it. So Rachna, coming back to you, sometimes people feel that building psychological safety, building empathy in teams, compassion comes at the cost of business deliverables. Both cannot go hand in hand. If I give too much of rope to my employees, they will take it easy. Do you think that's true? Does being compassionate as a leader uh, have its, or being inclusive as a leader, being flexible as a leader, come with its own little dangers?
Very interesting question. And as you asking me this question, I'm trying to understand why only leaders, even as parents, are we not changing? Are we the same as our parents? No. I mean, what worked around one generation or two generations before is not working. We are more
Yeah,
flexible, more accommodating, we are more absorbing, and that's how it is. So it's not
yeah,
just about leaders and managers, it's also about us as human beings. While on
yeah,
one side, we need to be a little more tolerant, a little more inclusive. Not everything is happening like that across the world, though. But
yeah,
we need to keep reminding ourselves, right? And I can tell you that, with COVID, a lot of us have discovered, reflected, introspected that the type of leadership that's required for the next, it's like what got you here will not get us there, right? So We need to change. We need to, and this is what COVID taught us, right? And I can tell you, this is not something that the organization or the HR teams can help us with. How much psychological safety, how much culture we build in our teams, the type of culture that we build in our teams is completely dependent on us or managers and leaders or parents or, the culture of homes, etc. Right? So it depends on the individual rather than anybody else. The toughest managers and leaders are sometimes the most inclusive. So there is
Mm,
no, I've had very, very tough, demanding bosses or managers, but I would give an arm and a leg to work from there for them once again. Why? Because when I would need support or sponsorship, they would be the first ones. So I don't think it's vice versa, but I would say it definitely it's a two-way street, right?
mm,
There are managers, there are leaders who would fight against the system. And coming back to your point and Ganga's points on courageous leadership, I think it's two ways. Second, it is also a lot about vulnerability and leadership. The word leadership is changing, right?
mm,
What was like, demanding one way is now interactive. It's two ways. It's, you when we do town halls nowadays, it's not like one way direction, right? You take feedback. There are opinion surveys. Like I mean, I can talk about Bayer. We do opinion polls, opinion surveys, where we take the feedback of employees almost every 6 months, and that becomes a KRA for a manager. I mean, if the
mm,
engagement levels go down, we actually sit down and understand what went wrong, what can we do more, right? And this is something which directly comes from the employees. The second thing, and
mm,
when I coming back to the point of vulnerability, leadership
mm.
is not any more differentiated than vulnerability. There are times that as leaders we have to show our vulnerability, and I can say authentic leadership is the
Mm,
word that I would say. Genuineness. There are things people would do just walk the talk, but no, the teams get
yeah.
to know, right? And the psychological, and I can tell you, I mean, I've had very very many instances post COVID where teams or team members have gone through tough times
Mm,
and have become, and there are times that it would come back on you and you have to absorb it back, right?
yep.
That's where leadership, as we say, like there have been team members for me who've been extremely tough. They, in their personal, individual spaces, and it comes out, it shows up at work, and that is why we've seen so much of movement within organization. The Great Resignation period did not just come just like that, right?
Yes.
Because somebody somewhere could not absorb the disturbances, right? As
Yes.
leaders now we need to do that, and if we have to retain, I think team members understand the intent, the support, and these are the time, the toughest times. If we can win a heart, I think that sticks on. And I
Yeah.
don't think people are looking for money every time or compensation or growth. Sometimes they just want somebody to hold them and be vulnerable along with them, give them the safety. And I think HR teams are encouraging. And as I said, toughness does not mean that somebody is not empathetic. It does.
Yes.
It's not mutually exclusive, right? So I think
Both can go
we all learned
hand in hand.
both
Sorry?
can both can go. Sometimes, I mean, not all tough leaders are great as well, right? So it's both ways, and it's not like if you very compassionate or very empathetic. Sometimes, if you don't know where to draw the line, that again becomes an issue. So it has to be balanced well, and it's a journey. Leadership again is a journey. You learn it along the way, and
Yeah.
COVID, all of us learned in our own ways.
Yes. And also, I believe, um, different situations might demand us to be
Yes,
empathetic. And, there might be a time when you need to be demanding. There might be a situation where you might want to show that you can be vulnerable, which gives
absolutely,
your team to be, confident that they can be vulnerable with you. Because
absolutely,
unless as a leader I show that I can be vulnerable, I too can be weak or have a moment of weakness, how will I give the confidence to my team to be weak in front of me or be vulnerable in front of me. I need to
Yes,
build that trust first.
and also to each his own. It is no two persons you deal with in a similar manner, right? For some
Absolutely.
people, you really do not have to show it. They understand what you're going
Yeah.
through, right? For some
Yeah.
people, you have to go out of the way to show it, to express it. For others, you have to really lean in and pull them out from a situation. People have gone through
Yeah.
so much of mental strength, mental breakdown these days. Sometimes you have to
Yeah.
just extend your hand. For others, they would call out for help, right? So I think
Yeah.
it's for different people, it's different. But as
Mm.
I come back to the point, it's not mutually exclusive.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you so much for that. Uh, Ganga, I have a rather sensitive question now, and this question is around a toxic culture. I have been reading a lot on LinkedIn being written about toxic culture, which is actually the right opposite of what we've been talking about, which is an inclusive culture. And what is generally seen is that if a manager is delivering on results, is very task oriented, result oriented, and might not be a great people manager, might be a micromanager, might be berating people, badgering people. Very often, organizations or HR or leadership shies away from taking a tough stand because end of the day, the manager is delivering results. What's your take on this? Because it does impact employee morale, it impacts employee retention, it impacts culture. In the long run, it impacts a lot of things. But and it's not one company. It is not one sector. It has been observed many a times and uh, at many a places.
So, I'd say one thing that has happened during COVID is people have experienced and been able to bring their human side to work more than we ever gave ourselves permission to do before, right? And because of this, there is so much more courage and confidence in people to talk when they're unhappy, to talk when they're not feeling safe, right? And if somebody is perceived as a toxic manager at the cost of performance, at the cost of culture, is something that no forward-thinking organization is going to be accepting of, because at some point the cookie is going to crumble and it's all going to come down around you. uh, I think the best way for an organization to be able to tackle this is for leaders to have an eye out for each other. It's very possible that the person who's being perceived as toxic doesn't realize that they are being toxic, right? And until we give people feedback, how do we give them a chance to change or to improve or to even explain their point of view? So I think just like we as employees are always given a chance to get feedback and change and probably adapt to a different way of doing work. Similarly, managers and leaders are also employees at the end of the day, and if they're being perceived as not performing in the way that they should from a people perspective, I
Mm.
think one, there has to be a feedback mechanism that helps them recognize this and realize this, and then it's up to that person to make a choice on how they want to come across. And that's why I think 360 feedback mechanisms become so important in companies. These days we do it twice a year, right? It's not just once a
Right.
year. It's so important to keep a pulse on what your employees are feeling. And even though people are working remote and all of that today, somewhere I feel transparency has become such an obvious part of our day to day work that it's not possible to hide behind just performance if you're not a part of the company ethos.
Mm.
Uh, and that's the way I think toxicity will get recognized as well as corrected. But I still believe it's important to not use labels and to give everybody a chance to address feedback and find a way to adapting to how to work in an organization.
Actually, it really depends from culture to culture. While you say that, today while working remotely, people have found a lot of courage to actually speak up and when they don't feel safe, there still might be a lot of companies where, um, because of the way the culture is, the employees might not feel safe to speak up. And that is where, if uh, there, if 360-degree feedback happens, and if we can, and there, if that feedback works, if HR can work with that manager on feedback, on coaching and counseling, and it can make a difference, then yes, it would really help. Let me go to Tanima on this one. And Tanima, you did share something about something of similar nature in your organization. That how do you deal with similar cases, if at all? And she's having some network issues. Okay, and she dropped off. All right. So while we wait for Tanima, let me just see the exit full screen. Okay, let's wait. So there are multiple layers here of psychological safety, of balancing between vulnerability, of empathy, accountability. Very often, I find that when we speak to clients, very often we speak to HR, but end of the day, as Tanima said, that the culture creators or drivers are managers and leaders. So, Tanima, can you hear me? Are you there? I think she's still struggling with network. And that has been the biggest issue that we've faced throughout our virtual journey with network. But having said that, both Rachna, Ganga, and Tanima as well. Uh, there you are. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I'm so sorry. There is something wrong with the network today.
That is something that we can be very inclusive about. No worries on that. Um, Tanima, one last question. You were talking about dealing with managers, and Ganga said, let's not label, so I'm not using the word. But let's talk about managers who struggle between, balancing between task orientation, result orientation, and people management. And how would you manage with your culture of keeping people at the center? And if you had a scenario where you have you had handled such cases in the past? Yeah, again. So I guess we'll have to wait for that answer online from Tanima. So thank you so much, Rachna and Ganga. Any parting messages for our audience on inclusion, on role of managers before we wrap up? It's 2 minutes to 8. Let me just see if we have any questions. No, we don't have any messages in the chat.
Okay, I'll
Can
go.
you?
So I think it's important for all of us to recognize, as managers as well as people, that we are all products of our conditioning, right? And a lot of times, the way we behave is a product of our experiences and deep-rooted beliefs. And today, thankfully, there are so many resources available to be able to understand these biases and be able to recognize and work around them. And that, I think, is the first step that many organizations are taking to help people of all genders across levels understand these biases that might be subconsciously at work. And I think that is one great way to blur some of these, hard boundaries that we see, which do not allow inclusive behaviors. And I have found that a very, very liberating place to start at.
I so agree with you. I think inclusion starts with awareness. If we accept that we all need to be inclusive, I think we can just break our own barriers. Beautiful. Thank you so much for that. Yes, Rachna.
Yeah, just one point here. I think inclusiveness starts with our own self. We need to
Yes,
start accepting our flaws, our strengths, our weaknesses, and not be very tough on ourselves. I think that is the first thing that I would say to all the leaders, not to be very tough on ourselves, because if we try and balance everything, there is nothing called a perfect balance. We have to integrate everything. If something falls off, I think we need to be a little more inclusive, a little more tolerant, and I guess that is the world needs more of this. Leaders
I
who are going to present, positive, leaders who can celebrate failures, leaders who can continue to support people at the toughest times. I think that's the world we are getting into. There are
love
enough people, enough leaders who are not in that direction. I think as people managers, optimism, uh, strength during tough times, and flexibility is something that I would say is the first stepping stone to inclusiveness.
absolutely. Thank you so much. Yes, Tanima.
So yeah, I think inclusivity starts at home, and inclusivity starts individual, right? It's very important of how you are and what you bring out. And an important factor in this is that nothing is forever, right? So it's a learn, unlearn, and relearn as a growth cycle for everybody. There are certain things that were right at some given point in time which are not right anymore, so you unlearn them and then you pick up things that are important, and you change your mindset towards something that's more progressive and say, this is how I need to move. I think that's where inclusivity comes in, right? And inclusivity is all about awareness at the end of the day. The more self-aware you are, the more aware you're making your teams, whether in terms of um, empathy, whether in terms of curiosity, whether in terms of psychological development, whether in terms of gender preferences. I mean, these are all inclusivity channels that organizations and managers need to identify. But yeah, they're definitely starting with people, and people who hold some sort of a influence on others. And I think organizations and managers and leaders should definitely make conscious efforts to identify what is the trend, what is the requirement, and how and act accordingly.
Absolutely. And you know what? I always, whenever I reflect and I think about biases and barriers that we face, I always think that, whenever we were born or any child was born anywhere, we were not born with biases. We were not born knowing that whether I was a boy or a girl, or whether which part of the world I was born in, what color of skin I was, or whether I was born rich or poor, or what orientation I was, etc., etc. But as I began to grow, I started to get cues from the society, from my family, from my parents, from my educators, from my friends, from TV, from social media. And those over a period of time told me what was acceptable, what was not acceptable, what was norm, what was not norm, what was appropriate and what was not appropriate. And those became my belief system.
Yeah.
So our biases are not a part of our DNA. So it's not like we cannot change it.
Yeah.
So what Ganga said, or what Rachna said, or what Tanima said, if we believe that we want to be inclusive, We can be inclusive. It just starts with us, it starts with home, it starts with awareness, and there is no wrong or right answer. It's okay to make mistakes. I mean, if I don't know about the LGBTQ community, it's all right. I can always learn. If I don't know about the 21 disabilities, it's all right. If I don't know something about my team member, it's all right. I can have an authentic conversation where I can be vulnerable and learn about the team member and be inclusive. Start the journey of being inclusive. So, thank you so much, ladies, for this lovely conversation, for your candid thoughts, for your candid insights, for your shares of what you're doing in your organizations. Uh, it will make a lot of difference, I know, because when leaders like you speak about what you've done at Epsilon, at Bayer, at Zoo Media, then it's not about just Gyan, it's about real examples. And that inspires people. So thank you so much for taking out time today. Um, a lot of gratitude for that. Thank you very much.
Thank you
Thank
for
you,
having
Sonia,
us,
for
Sonia.
bringing us together. Yeah, it was a lovely conversation and lovely meeting you, Rachna and Tanima.
Likewise, Anga. Like,
Thank you.
All
Thank you,
right. Have a
Sonika.
very good weekend.
Bye
you
bye.
too.
Thank
Take
Have a
care.
wonderful
Bye,
weekend.
everyone.
Thank you. Bye. Bye bye. See you.
you. All right. Bye.